House building leaders are warning that London's housing pipeline is on the verge of collapse, branding the capital a no-go zone for housing investment. The stark assessment comes in the Home Builders Federation's Mind the Gap report, which lays bare how every key indicator of the housing delivery in London is now heading in the wrong direction. And the report warns that red tape, safety regulator delays, and affordability issues are choking supply. Planning consents have collapsed to their lowest level since records began in 2006. At the same time, almost 10,000 homes are stuck in the Building Safety Regulator's Gateway 2 process, with approvals dragging on for more than 6 months. The reason I wanted to share that one with you, if you remember rightly, when we used to have Neil Edwards on the show, the house building industry used to account for somewhere between a third and a half of all UK construction activity, and a large proportion of that was made up out of London. Both have collapsed. That's not good. Not good at all. If you've got any thoughts on that, please let me know in the chat. More bad news, I'm afraid. Vidi Construction up in Coventry has gone out of business after 20 years. The £40 million turnover contractor employed around 40 staff and relied on up to 200 trade workers at peak times before calling in the administrators. They specialise in residential new build and conversion projects across the Midlands and the South. Residential again, further evidence of all these house builders really struggling at the moment. If you'd like to know more about either of those first two stories, you can find out more over on Construction Inquirer. A joiner has won holiday pay tribunal despite not being an employee. A joiner has won a claim for holiday pay and deducted wages after an employment tribunal ruled he worked at a small contractor even though he wasn't an employee. Rivergate Developments, a family-run specialist contractor, was ordered to pay £665 in unlawfully deducted payments and £399 in missing holiday pay. Now, I'm sure that the man who is known only in this investigation as a Mr. K. Brophy, I'm sure he is really quite pleased about that. But what does that mean to the wider employment world? I think we've already seen a bit of a blurring of the lines. What is it, maybe 2 years ago, since the rules changed on PPE? In other words, if you are an agency worker or you're a subcontractor and you're working on somebody's site, they are legally required to provide you with PPE, which kind of blurred the lines between employed and not employed. I think that further changes the rules. Bigger question on that one, which is the one that really struck me, is how does that affect his taxation classification, his national insurance payments? Does that mean he may have won money in that hand and he's now going to pay it out in the other? And long term, if that does set a precedent, are we not going to see employers basically factoring that in, paying you a bit less so that should you decide to sue them, they've got some money standing by? Is that not an issue that we need to contend with? I published a story today over on Substack. It is behind a paid firewall, but if you haven't been there before, you can grab it basically free of charge. And cut a long story short, we are now in demolition and construction industry silly season for awards. Okay, there's been a bunch of awards. 3, I think, have already happened. 1 is about to happen. One of the winners, the Construction News Specialist Awards, was John F. Hunt. They won the Project of the Year up to £2 million. You might remember that John F. Hunt is the same company that was caught out by the CMA. They ended up paying a £5.6 million fine back in 2022. They also, their name above the door at the Teesworks site in Redcar, where 2 workers were perished. To this day, 2 of the widows of the 2 men still waiting for answers. Should they be in the running for an award? It's not unique to them. It was announced just a day or 2 ago. DSM Demolition picked up a trophy for Project of the Year under £1 million for its work at the Old Royal University Liverpool Hospital. You might remember they too were a part of the CMA investigation. They ended up paying a fine of £1.4 million. In addition to that, there was a partial collapse on that site with DSM. Should they have been up for an award? Completing the list of questionable winners, Clifford Devlin, which has just won an award for Demolition Project of the Year over £1 million, they were fined £423,000 or thereabouts for their part in the CMA scandal. We take that off the screen because then you can see me. And then we've just received the shortlist for the World Demolition Awards for 2025. Less problematic, I have to say, but in amongst all of those is Brown and Mason. Brown and Mason suffered a fatality back in 2019 on their site at Longannet. They too were part of the CMA investigation. They too were fined, and they were fined for £2.4 million. So my question is, How long should a contractor pay penance? After a fatality, after a serious accident, after a partial collapse, or after being found guilty of collusion? Should they be in the running for industry awards? And if they are, what does that say about the current standing of the industry?